There is a king. It reigns in solitude, in an empire of absolute darkness and cold. It is the farthest human-made object in history. A silent, lonely monarch sailing through the black ocean between the stars. This king has a name, Voyager 1. For 47 years, it has been our eyes and ears in the great void, a tiny, drifting piece of humanity that has tasted the dust of interstellar space. Its voice, a faint whisper, powered by decaying plutonium, has been our only link to the universe beyond our cradle. And then, on November 14, 2023, that voice, suddenly, stopped making sense. It didn't go silent. It did something worse. It began to speak in tongues. From 15 billion miles away, Voyager 1, our interstellar ambassador, started sending back a bizarre, repetitive stream of gibberish, a meaningless loop of 1's and 0's. It was like calling a loved one, and in the middle of a sentence, hearing nothing but a robotic dial tone, over and over and over. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the mood was grim. The king was not dead. Its heart was still beating, but its mind was gone. This is the story of a 47-year-old ghost in the machine. It's the story of an impossible diagnosis, a 45-hour gamble, and the incredible true story of the NASA engineers who performed digital brain surgery to bring a 1970s probe back from the dead.
To understand the crisis, you must first understand the distance. Voyager 1 is not just far away. It is 24 billion kilometers, or 15 billion miles from Earth. It exists in a place we can barely comprehend. At that distance, even light, the fastest thing in the universe, takes 22.5 hours to reach it. Think about that. If you are a JPL engineer, your entire reality is dictated by a 45-hour delay. You type a command, you hit send, you wait 22.5 hours for your question, traveling at 186,000 miles per second to even arrive at the probe. Then, you must wait another 22.5 hours for the answer to come back. To simply ask, "Are you okay?" is a 45-hour investment. Every single attempt to fix this problem, every command, every poke would be a 2-day gamble. And the problem they were facing was deep. The team quickly diagnosed the source of the gibberish. It was coming from the Flight Data System, or FDS. The FDS is not just a computer, it is the computer. It is Voyager's central nervous system. It's the probe's consciousness. The FDS gathers all the vital information from the science instruments and the probe's own engineering sensors, its health, its temperature, its orientation. It then bundles all of this data into a single coherent package, ready to be beamed back to Earth. But now, the FDS was broken. It was stuck in a loop. It was packaging nothing. It was sending home an empty, repeating signal. The team was flying blind, and their patient was 15 billion miles away. This wasn't the first time Voyager 1 had sent a bizarre signal. In fact, it had a history of ghosts in the machine.
Just a year earlier, in May 2022, Voyager 1 gave its creators a different kind of heart attack. The probe began sending back telemetry data that was impossible. The data, which describes the probe's orientation in space, its attitude, was nonsensical. It looked like the probe was randomly tumbling through space.
But the signal itself was still strong. It was still locked on to Earth. This meant the probe wasn't tumbling. It was stable, but its own brain thought it was. Here's where it gets truly strange. After weeks of investigation, the team discovered the FDS had, for reasons unknown, started sending its data through a different computer. A computer that had been officially dead for years. It was routing its health data through a piece of hardware that had failed and was no longer meant to be used. It was, quite literally, like getting a coherent message from a ghost. The fix for that 2022 incident was thankfully simple. NASA sent a single command, effectively telling the FDS, stop talking to the ghost, use the correct functioning computer. And it worked. The probe snapped back to normal. The crisis was over. But this time, in November 2023, it was different. This wasn't a routing error. This wasn't a quirk. This was fundamental brain damage. The FTS itself, the very consciousness of the probe, was now the source of the problem. The ghost was no longer just a ghost. It was a fatal symptom. And the 45-hour delay meant that traditional troubleshooting was impossible. So, how do you fix a computer you can't see, can't touch, and can only talk to once every 2 days? First, you have to understand your patient. And this patient is 47 years old. Voyager 1 was designed in the early 1970s. Its technology is ancient. The FDS, the brain we are talking about, has a total memory of 69.63 kilobytes. Not megabytes, not gigabytes, kilobytes. A single low-resolution photo of your cat on your smartphone takes up more memory than Voyager's entire central nervous system. A single icon on your phone's home screen is more complex than the FDS. This memory is a marvel of 1970s efficiency. Every single byte is meticulously planned. Every line of code is a masterpiece of minimalism. There is no wasted space. There is no hard drive. There is just 69 kilobytes of plated wire memory. And for 5 agonizing months, from November 2023 to early 2024, the JPL team tried everything. They sent commands to reset the FDS. They sent commands to try and isolate the problem. Every 45 hours, the same answer came back: gibberish. The FDS was stuck. It wouldn't respond to any command. The team was on the verge of giving up. Voyager 1 had lived an incredible life. It had given humanity Jupiter, Saturn, and the first ever glimpse of interstellar space. Maybe this was it, a noble end, dying of old age in the darkness. But the team, led by Voyager's project manager Suzanne Dodd and the deeply experienced engineers at JPL, decided to try one last thing. It was a Hail Mary. They couldn't fix the FDS, but maybe, just maybe, they could get it to talk about why it was broken. In March 2024, they sent a new, clever command, a poke, designed to bypass the stuck loop and just read. The command was simple: dump your entire memory. Send us everything. Send us all 69 kilobytes, the good, the bad, and the broken. They waited 45 hours, and for the first time, something different came back. It was the full memory dump, a complete brain scan of the patient.
The team, which includes engineers who have been with the project for decades, are among the only people on Earth who can still read this 1970s-era code. They printed out the data. They compared it, line by line, to the healthy version of the code that they had on file from 1977. And after weeks of analysis, they found it. The smoking gun. A single, tiny fraction of the FDS memory was corrupted. About 3% of its total memory. The culprit was a single, failed hardware chip. After 47 years of bombardment by high-energy cosmic rays, a critical piece of the probe's memory had finally, physically, worn out. This chip was gone forever, and the vital code it held was gone with it. This code was essential. It was the part of the FDS's brain responsible for packaging all the engineering and science data. This was the stroke. This was the source of the gibberish. The patient now had a terminal diagnosis. The part of its brain that allowed it to speak was dead.
The situation seemed hopeless. You can't fix a broken chip from 15 billion miles away. But the JPL team didn't give up. If the place the code lived was dead, then the code would have to move. This is where the true genius of the Voyager team began. They devised a plan so audacious, so incredibly delicate, it can only be described as digital brain surgery. Here was the new problem. The FDS memory was completely full. Remember, 69 kilobytes, every byte assigned. There was no single empty house big enough to move the corrupted 3% of code into. But as the engineers scanned the memory map, they realized that while there were no large empty spaces, there were dozens of tiny, unused fragments scattered throughout the memory. Little pockets of space left over, a few bytes here, a few bytes there, not big enough for the whole code, but maybe, just maybe, big enough for pieces of it. So they hatched the plan. They would take the 3% of dead code, which they still have the original copy of on Earth. They would slice it into smaller, individual pieces. Then they would upload these pieces one by one and slot them into the tiny, scattered empty spaces they had found elsewhere in the FDS memory. This plan was already incredibly complex, but the next step was the real genius. It wasn't enough to just move the code. The rest of the FDS brain had to know where the code had moved to. This meant the team had to also rewrite all the other parts of the FDS code, updating them with the new addresses for all the little slices that they just moved. It's like taking a critical page from a book, tearing that page into individual sentences, pasting those sentences into the empty margins of other chapters, and then having to rewrite the book's entire index to tell the reader exactly where every single one of those sentences now lived. And all of this on a 47-year-old computer, with a 45-hour time delay for every single command. If they got one address wrong, if one byte was out of place, they wouldn't just fail to fix the probe, they could brick it. They could kill it for good. The king would be dead.
On April 18th, 2024, the team was ready. They took a deep breath. They sent the first command. This first command was the most critical slice of the code. It was the part responsible for packaging the probe's engineering data, its own health and status. Without this, they were still blind. The signal, carrying the first piece of the new brain, left the Goldstone antenna in California. It traveled past the orbit of Mars. past the asteroid belt, past Jupiter, past Saturn, past Uranus, past Neptune. For 22.5 hours, it raced at the speed of light into the interstellar void. At JPL, the team did the only thing they could. They waited. They waited 45 hours. On April 20th, the signal returned. A new whisper from 15 billion miles away. The team decoded it. They stared at their screens. It was not gibberish. It was coherent. It was readable. For the first time in 5 months, Voyager 1 was speaking clearly. It was telling them its health, its status, its temperature. The surgery had worked. The patient was alive. The celebration at JPL was quiet, but profound. They had done the impossible. They had resurrected a mind from 15 billion miles away.
The work wasn't over. That first fix only restored the engineering data, the heartbeat. The science data, the very reason Voyager exists, the data from its instruments tasting the interstellar medium, was still offline. So, over the next few weeks, the team carefully sent more commands. They sliced and moved the rest of the code, the part that controls the science instruments, the part that formats the science data. And in mid-May, it worked. Voyager 1 began transmitting usable science data for the first time since November. Voyager 1 was officially, fully back from the dead. The bizarre ghost signals were never aliens. They were never a cryptic message from beyond. They were the desperate, garbled cries of a 47-year-old explorer, its mind broken, refusing to die, alone in the dark. And it was the persistence of a handful of brilliant, dedicated human beings, engineers who are more like digital archaeologists, who are patient enough to listen, to diagnose, and to perform a miracle. How long does Voyager 1 have left? We don't know. Its power, from its plutonium battery, fades with every passing year. NASA has been shutting down its instruments one by one, a planned hospice, just to keep its radio and its core computer alive. This repair was not a cure for old age. It was a final, heroic act of defiance. In a few years, perhaps by 2027, the last of its instruments will go dark. And sometime after that, its heart will finally stop. It will no longer have enough power to send even a dial tone back to Earth.
But Voyager is more than a machine. It is a symbol. It is a physical piece of our curiosity, our ambition, and our stubborn persistence. It is the part of us that sails into the void, that faces the cold and the dark, and refuses to be silent. Thanks to a handful of brilliant minds and a 45-hour heartbeat, that tiny royal voice continues its whisper from the empire of the stars.